John, Capobianco, hey, we meet again, my friend. How you doing?
I am doing great. I'm back, and this is maybe a better medium for people that maybe follow along with some of the craziness I bring up during our conversations.
You're a network automation madman, John, and I guess that's really why we're here today because you've been working on a bunch of stuff. You've got an open source project called Merlin.
It's called Merlin, yes, and it's inspired by Clarke's Third Law, as well as being a big Camelot fan and Excalibur fan and all that. When I did this a few times, it really felt like magic. I had to check a few times that it was all working, and it's just doing magical things in so fast that right any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So I was on this magic Merlin type theme, and yeah, I'm excited to show it.
Give us the high level of what Merlin does here. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny if you listen to our progression. This would be our third conversation together. Um, big Ansible fan, big network automation fan, big fan of parsers, and we talked about the JSON mania that still grips me to this day. But I thought, can I write something for the community that can do some of these things I've been talking about and evangelizing, like go capture the state of a network, transform it into business ready documents, as I call them, a CSV file, as simple as that, a markdown file, an HTML
Right.
web page. And then I started to find new ways to display this information, and we'll show them today mind maps, network graphs. I've even and it was funny from our last conversation, we were exploring what can we do with Jinja. Well,
Hmm.
and JavaScript object notation. Well, I've incorporated a tiny DB even into this. So now all that great JavaScript object notation we get is actually building a database as well. So that's where the foundation is capture network state and transform it. Now there's a couple of other utilities I've written, an asset management utility that does similar things but is serial number focused, as well as a configuration management utility where we kind of do a intent-based push of configs. But let's
Yeah.
just talk about the main Merlin state capture.
Yeah, because you got a lot there that we could do with it. So let's zero in on what exactly you're going to show us that Merlin can do today.
Great. So let me start sharing my screen, and what I think is neat, or what I've tried to do, share screen, is using the DevNet sandbox. Like I can't afford an Nexus 9000 to put in my basement as much as I'd love one. So I come to the DevNet sandbox, and as you can see, you just search for, in my case, today's demonstration is going to be a CSR 1000V, and you reserve it, and it gives you a little VPN information. And then now in my live sandbox, so we are connected to this ISR in the cloud. I'm just going to let it render the sandbox in a second. Whoops, here it is here. And just to give people an anchor point as to what I'm communicating with and what I'm transforming into these documents. So it's one of these CSRs that gives us the IP, and we have the credentials. And I'm just going to hop over to the README file. So this is the logo that the community actually created for me. I sort of had this vision of, can we rip apart the Python
Yeah,
logo and make
I
an
was going to
M
say
out of
that
it?
looks familiar
And
but different. Yeah, I see what you did there.
yeah. So someone really, they did an amazing job with that. So I'm building on, again, the Genie Python test automation software development kit, the PyATS framework. And again, I'm saying I'm featuring MarkMaps, network JSON graphs, and a tiny DB. So what it really does here is first it learns. So in the Ansible world, I really emphasize people starting with info modules, so for Windows servers or Linux servers, it's called the setup module. For Cisco, they have iOS info or NXOS info fax modules that just safely connect, run a bunch of commands, and give you JavaScript object notation back. Well, in this Pythonic way, they have a learn, and it's kind of by function. So as you can see, we can learn anything from ARP to OSPF or VLAN or routing.
But the big point is here, we're gathering data. We're not changing anything at this moment.
Absolutely. It's just safe and gathering these learned functions. And then it goes on beyond learning. It runs show commands at scale. Now, I don't want to cover this whole thing, but today we're going to see a subset because it's a virtual router that's minimally configured. But in the real world, to give you a sense, we're learning all of these commands. So about 15 learn commands, including the full configuration, and then all of these different show commands. And it's almost anything you can think of.
So Merlin's
Um,
going to execute all of this effectively, pull in a whole bunch of data from the CSR 1000 Vs that we've got configured in the DevNet sandbox. And then when we have all of that data, we're going to be able to do something with that information.
yeah, and I think that's the kind of the key point. Great. So we have this JavaScript object notation. What do you want to do with it now?
Hmm.
Well, I think what I've brought to the table, and this was something I learned from Yvonne Pepelniak from the
Mhm.
IP space community early in my automation career, was to leverage Jinja 2 templating. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that JavaScript and then turn it into different apps. Now, I'll show you, I'm not cheating here. So we're going to do show IP interface brief. Show IP, and I got a little bit of delay here. Brief, and we can see we have, 3 interfaces. One has an IP, and they're all up, up, up. So a healthy state. Let's run this in a healthy state via Merlin. And so I'm going to run the one-line Merlin command. And
Hey, John, if you can make the
yeah,
fonts bigger, that might help us a bit. If you can't, you can't, but if you can, that'd be great.
I think I can maybe in Ubuntu turn that into a larger font size. But I'm just going to minimize it here to the side while it runs. It's not important. It's just
Okay.
it's dumping. It's keeping its progress as it runs. But pay attention to these folders on the left, and these are the subset of features I'm learning and show commands that we're running, as well as a database file that's going to start to grow. So I also want to point out that this is kind of in a verbose mode by default. I have ASCII as placeholders. You can see right now. So here come the files. Here come all the files.
So
And
these are things that Merlin is generating based on the commands it ran against that remote device. It gathered that data and now it's expressing it. I'm seeing HTML and JSON and CSV and Markdown and YAML files being generated.
absolutely. So before we leave the job environment, I should have put the time command on. But all this happens in CPU in about 2 seconds, if you can imagine. Now, yes, there's maybe 30 seconds on the screen if we include all that. But what I like to do, um, I use the PyETS framework. As you can see, it treats everything as a Boolean step. So go ahead and learn ACL. And it gives me a nice pass-fail Boolean response whether it could learn interface or platform. Now, if I had something in this sandbox, let's say I tried to learn LLDP or CDP. Well, there's nothing connected to it, so that would just give me a fail, but it wouldn't crash the job. It just continues along. So this, from the Ansible analogy, they're tasks in Ansible, and in PyETS, they're steps that are considered tests.
Now, did you interface with an API or the CLI? Since we're talking about templates, I'm kind of assuming it's CLI, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No, great question. So these are all SSH CLI commands
Yeah.
using the Genie parser. Now, it's a great point. If I was using the REST conf API with, get, or if I was using NX API and Nexus using HTTP GET, I would get JavaScript back and I don't need the parser at that point. I just then take the JavaScript and can template it. So yes, this is I don't want to say legacy, but some people haven't actually enabled their APIs yet, right? Like this is working on a iOS XE, which comes with APIs on 9300s or 3850s or but let's say a 4500, it doesn't have that REST-conf API. And I
Hmm.
have a few of those in my environment. So I'm still doing this through CLI. So let's focus on, I thought today, it's an overwhelming amount of data, but let's look at show IP interface brief, right? This is what it looks like. It's our go-to command on a router, more or less. So that's the CLI version, and it's a small data set. There's only 3 interfaces. But let's look at the JavaScript that we get. Now, this is the linchpin. This is the key to everything else you're going to see. And because it's JavaScript, I can work with it in VS Code, and we can key in on, okay, this one has
So
an
you're showing me
IP
JSON.
address. For,
You're showing me a JSON expression of what we did just look at on the CLI when I typed the very familiar ShowIP interface brief. This is that data parsed against a template and rendered now as, yeah, that's JSON.
well, yes, and this, sorry, the only clarification is this is what we get back from the PyATS parse, device.parse command.
Okay,
I have
Merlin
not
didn't have to
templated.
parse that.
Right, I haven't templated
Yeah,
this in any way. The
yeah.
other file is the YAML file, which again, I haven't templated. I just say in Pythonically, give me, YAML.dump versus JSON.dump and give me it in a YAML dictionary, which is
Okay.
kind of handy if you'd rather read YAML versus JSON. But as we can see, when everyone talks about infrastructure as code, right, this is two programmatic expressions of that basic CLI standard output, right? So
Yes, very much.
now,
Yeah.
yeah, now we can move on to where I come in with the templating. So let's look at the CSV expression of the show IP interface brief. Now, again, there's only 3 interfaces, but what if there was hundreds of interfaces, right? What if this is FEX attached data center device with, over 100 interfaces on it or something, right?
So, quick question here. Someone could ask the question, wait a minute, if PyATS did all the parsing for me, what the heck did Merlin do for me? Did Merlin's expressing all of this structured data in all of these different formats? Is that what Merlin did for me?
Yes, so where Merlin comes in is doing I'm going to express it as Python dot render, right? So here I'll put this up side by side with what made this file. It's a good question. It's a really good point. So I have this library of templates, and look at all these templates. This is kind of my contribution to the open source world, are these Jinja 2 templates. So here is the show IP interface brief. So what I do, Ethan, it's kind of neat. I make a little for loop, and you can see here my first statement is it CSV? And if that's true, then it renders the CSV version of this command, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
comma separated with a header row. And that's side by side, that's what we're getting here, right? The variable here, and this is the magic of Jinja. I'm glad we're exploring this because it's sometimes hard for people to, like, what do you mean a template and you just plug variables into it and it gives me a magic file? Yeah. And in this
Yeah.
output, this is my second set, which is the markdown version. So I say, okay, it's not CSV, it's MD in my loop. Give me markdown. And markdown is expressed with a title and a piped out version with delimiters and stuff. And then if you look closely below the markdown is my HTML version of this.
Mhm.
So now, okay, great. So what? I have a CSV file. What is that? I mean, the CSV file transformed the planet in about 1984 or 83 or something, right? It's going to transform, like, look at, okay, which interfaces have an IP address? Well, I just filter out anything without an IP,
Dude, you
right?
don't have
Which
to sell me on
interfaces
the
are up?
value. Before I would way back, like say I had to do some kind of a massive switch migration or something, I would take output like this, um, work through it in a text editor to kind of get it delimited and kind of structured, and then bring it into a spreadsheet just so I could work with it. The value here is incredible for all kinds of things.
Yeah. So then, because I think what's the few extra cycles in the CPU and what is disk space? It's nothing anymore. So let's express it a few different ways. Some people, and like let's say a GitHub repo. This is all stored in a GitHub repo. So let's do it in Markdown. Now this is an unrendered Markdown, but my linter didn't pick up any problem with it. I'm going to come back to that point why that's important. This is known as a well-formed Markdown file, and I can render it in VS Code. Hey, that looks very pretty. Now in
Mm.
github.com or whatever, just like your README files in GitHub are Markdown, that's what you're reading. This renders really nicely in a browser. Operations, they have the hot link to the Git repo, they check the Markdown file. Hey, look, it's down. That's not good. right? Like it's just a different way to present it. And then the last file, and you're going to like this, I did something a little cute for us today, is the HTML file, which again I could send to an IIS server, an Apache server, whatever you want. Now this is unrendered, and then we render it, open in default browser, and there's the heavy
Yeah.
networking packet pushers logo overlaid to the information in a table. Now, because it's HTML, you can see I've actually put some logic in here to say, okay, if the interfaces say up, make them nice and bright green, right? They're
Yeah.
good and they're happy. So, okay, so those are my three what I call business ready files. Now let's take a look at something else, some other ways we can represent this information. So I mentioned the well-formed markdown file. I found um, I found this utility called MarkMap, which is a Node.js utility, Node JavaScript, that framework, or whatever you want to call it. There's a utility called MarkMap, which will take any well-formed markdown file and turn it into a mind map like this
Hmm.
that you can collapse and zoom. I can come in and out. And now I don't know. Again, I'm not selling you the value of these files. I just have fun. This is a great way to represent the data. And who loves this for some reason? My Gen Z staff. They're like all in on these mind maps, the zoom and the click, and they can, I don't know, I kind of like it. It's kind of fun and neat. And I'll be honest,
Yeah.
it's very nice for small data sets, right? I have 3 interfaces here. When there's 500 interfaces, it's literally this massive sprawled tree of all these. And you can see it's a CSV file turned on its head. I have all the different header information here. So that's a mind map. Now, even looking further, you'll see I have 2 other files here. Now let's look at the JSON quick. This is what's called net JSON or network graph JSON. And it's made up of nodes. So these are all my nodes. And then the links between said nodes. Now I have to turn on my web server real quick. And I want to highlight this. This is something I've learned along my way, Ethan. Did you know you can just do like Python 3 http.server and spin up a web server
I
like
was
that
aware of
easily?
that, although I haven't played with that. But yeah, I was aware of that. That Python's got that built in. Yeah.
It's really neat. So now I just go to my local, right? And let's take a look at that net. So this is a network JSON graph, and we are doing IP interface brief. And it makes this file. So there's my CSR, and I'm going to drag it to the side. And you can see it has 3 interfaces. And because these two share the commonality of unassigned, I can look at it that way. Show me all my unassigned interfaces. Well, there's,
Oh, I
GI2
see.
and
Yeah.
3.
Okay.
Or here, GI1 has this IP address.
So it's a different, again, just another way to represent the data. I mean, we're not looking at a network graph of like interconnected devices.
Correct. Now I can, while we're on this topic, geez, does it have any routes? I don't know if it has routes. Here, this is the better one. So this one here is, again, there's the sandbox, and it has a default VRF with IP address family 4, and it has these routes attached to it, right? So there's the default route, and you can see the default route has a preference, and it has 1 hop, and the next hop takes you to this address.
Hmm.
So you can actually trace this from the sandbox device all the way out to the next hop. Now, again, it's kind of like the mind map. How valuable is this file? Are you really going to use something like this in production? I don't know. I'm
But
having
it,
fun with it, right?
it underscores a point, though, that when you've got structured data, the flexibility you have to express it is very rich. You can do a lot of things, and right, maybe this is a more of a proof of concept than immediately useful, but it's interesting, and yeah, you're having fun with it.
Yeah. So those are the different file types, and again, we get them for all the different commands. And again, I have this. This is actually the database, which is every one of those main JSON files stuffed into what's called a NoSQL or a document database. It's a horizontally scaling database, which again, I can actually query with structured query language, or TinyDB query language, or build front ends or include it as an Android app backend. Lots of possibilities there. I haven't really explored the database too much. Okay, so let's affect change and let's get into the real fun stuff here. Why people tuned in to see chatbots and voice bots. So I just have to sign back in to shut down the interface. And so again, my hope here, Ethan, is that see this testbed file with this one CSR. So what my hope is that people can just clone my Git repo, clone Merlin, plug in their own testbed file, and then all the templating and data modeling and all that other stuff is taken care of for them. Then they just have those output files that we looked at. That's my hope. And because it's templates, they are pretty universal, and it's actually worked pretty well in the open source world where people have cloned the repo, put their own testbed file in, and been able to capture their states. Okay, here's the bad thing. Someone logs into your main router and they think they're shutting interface 3, but they shut interface 2. And now whatever has happened because of that interface. Let's rerun the exact same line of code here. And again, it's not so important. I'm going to call up my Discord and I'm going to call up my WebEx. I'm going to try to stagger these two. So what got me interested in it truly was I needed to be reached from the office, and I'm in Discord a lot. And I thought, right, isn't there a way that that the network could just call me through WebEx and send me a message if there's some problem? So in WebEx, they use webhooks, and it was actually very, very easy to get going. If you go to your server settings in Discord, there's an integrations button, and you just add a webhook, and then you choose which channel in your main Discord server you want. So I set up an actual channel called webhook testing, and look at, so that interface is down. Merlin's just running in the background. Boom.
And
Hello,
and you've got a hook into the into Discord, and so now when alarms come up, you can just feed this information as text right into the channel. Pretty standard chatbot stuff.
Yeah, and it's templated, right? So hello, John, Ethan, heavy networking fans, and everyone watching on YouTube and everyone around the world. Sorry to inform you that the device DevNet Sandbox CSR1000V has a problem. The following interfaces have been disconnected, GI2, right? This is an important alarm from the DevNet Sandbox. Merlin has detected a problem with your network. And we get the same thing here in WebEx. So that's the chatbotting. Now, some people have gone very far, a lot farther than I have with chatbots, in that they have bidirectional where
Mhm.
they can say, is the CSR 1000V healthy? Enter, and then get that natural
Right.
feedback.
It's one thing for the chatbot to
Right.
populate the channel with data. It's another thing to actually have the bot patrolling the room looking for input and then acting on it. Right.
Right. And I'm hoping to evolve that and bring that into the project. So now let's so again, that was my inspiration where I was kind of like, okay, I have this JavaScript object notation, and I can quite easily through Python requests post that upstream to other APIs, right? More machine to machine traffic. So in Discord, if you hover over the message button, it actually says, speak this message is one of the options in Discord for it to do the text to speech and give
Mhm.
you audio of the message that you've received. And I kind of went, well, can I do that on my own? Like, can I find a TTS service in the cloud, send it a Jinja templated message, and get an MP3 file back? And it turns out there's actually multiple providers of this service. Google has one,
Okay.
Azure has one, there's third-party TTS services. It's free from Google. You just need, you need to set up your Google developer account and set up an
Yep.
OAuth 2 and get the right. There's some steps involved, but it's pretty easy to do. And I'll just show here, like, um, this is kind of the text so it's maybe 10 lines of code. There's a lot of comments in here to make it easy for people. but you just feed it what you want and say, give me an MP3 file of it. So then you, in a separate post, I send that to my automateyournetwork.ca, which then, and this comes from the community actually, someone in the community they saw me playing MP3 files on Twitter and they said, have you played with Twilio? You might be able to make a phone call with that. And I was
Yeah.
like, that would be really cool. That would be like the ultimate thing, right? So right away I signed up for Twilio, which to be between us or between YouTube and everyone, I was aware of them as I thought they were like a commercial grade ISP to ISP major SMS backhaul. I thought of it as a commercial grade service, but they actually have a consumer grade portal and consumer grade tools that I've tapped into here. So all I'm going to do is run, right, that interface is still down and I'm not cheating in any way. This is really grabbing the information. So I'm going to run this. And if you want to get your phone ready, really testing the real state of the network. So this is going to take a few seconds here. And again, I'm in Ottawa, and Ethan's, he's in another part of the world for in sense of real time. And
I'm in Antarctica. That's right. McMurdo Station doing deep science. No, not that far away. But we are hundreds of miles apart, John.
So again, it's crawling through, and when we see the Grail, that's indicating it's writing to the database and it's writing out the files.
The Grail.
And
you
then
and your ASCII art, it's beautiful.
I can't help it. And now here should come the phone calls.
Oh, there's my phone call.
Ringing.
Okay, it says John's network is calling me. I answer it. Let's put it on speakerphone here.
Networking fans, and everyone watching on YouTube from around the world. I am sorry to inform you that the device devnet_sandbox_CSR1000V has a problem. The following interfaces have been disconnected. Gigabit Ethernet 2.
Very cool.
Isn't that fun? And for everyone at home, Ethan and I we didn't stage this or trial this. That's his real response, his real reaction in real time. So I'm so glad that when software works during the demo.
That's cool. Okay, so I get that call. So what just happened there was information gathering. Then an event was detected that needed to be reacted to. There was a message that was generated because of the interface being down. You put that through a text-to-speech parser, and then you called a library somewhere that ended up ringing up via Twilio's, the Twilio voice over IP service to call my phone. And then I got that generated MP3 from the text-to-speech message played through that voice over IP call telling me what happened. So rather than the templating just showing up all these different file types and so on, you actually used it to, why not make it into a voice call effectively?
Reach out and phone somebody. Now, I know it seems, it's fun and it's kind of kitschy, you said, and but like, I can think of many situations where, right, we think about mean time to respond. And do I wait for a syslog and an SNMP to be picked up by my NOC, and then they cut a ticket, and then eventually they reach out and escalate, and certain things, if it could call me, right, the Exchange server has been unplugged, or there's a vulnerability on the Exchange server. Look what the world just went through with all of these vulnerabilities costing us, vital infrastructures under attack. So there's many things we can connect here to our phone system now, right?
At for little or no cost as well. I
don't
know what the Twilio number cost you. I don't think they're much, right?
They're not much. So I put $10 into my Twilio so that it would remove the there was a trial account message originally when I was doing these phone calls. It would say, right, it would make you listen to a trial, and then you had to push one. And I kind of wanted to get rid of that for my demos. So I put $10 in, and these phone calls cost fractions of a pennies on the phone call kind of thing, to anywhere in the world in real time. And the other thing is, in some of my other demos, for the sake of time, we don't have to do it, but I have over 200 languages to choose from in gender neutral male or female voice tones. So I've actually, and then what do you need? Well, you just need French or Greek or Spanish or Japanese or Ukrainian in your Jinja 2 template so that, and you send it to the appropriate API that will generate that language naturally. So like I have colleagues that would rather get an on-call in French Canadian. That would be easier for them to consume because that's their primary language, right? So it's unlimited possibilities here. And you can, like, just to tie it back to the, I'm still sharing my screen, I believe.
Yep, you sure are.
If we go back to this JSON, right? And I don't have to go through all of them, but every one of these things has these little keys. And I can pick protocol, status. You know what I mean? If the IP address of this interface is not 20.48, that's a big, right? That's a problem. We can add our own level of assurance to say, look, I'm going to get a phone call if gi2 dot is interfaced okay Pythonically, is not equal yes. So that could be down, admin down, error disable. If it's not up, make that phone call, right?
So how much of what we've gone through is part of Merlin and that work that you've done for the Merlin project, and how much of that was like extra stuff that you were just leveraging the data that Merlin generated to, like, do the fancy phone call and stuff?
Oh yeah, it's almost all I don't want to minimize it, but I'm happy to show the Python, or it's open source, it's out there. I'm not writing my own Python libraries, or I do have a couple of general functionalities in Python. So this is where you can see I have the try device.parse and then the command name, or try device.learn and the function name. Different things like that is what I've added. But in terms of the Twilio, I'm basically taking exactly what they show me how to write it. And so this is kind of what I've written here is declare the templates and then go in and render the template and then connect it upstream to different APIs and things of that nature.
So the Twilio stuff then, those scripts that you built are part of Merlin?
Yeah, well, they are and they are not. So that's a good point. There's one of my repositories is called the Modern Show version under my Automate Your Network repo. That does have all of these examples, the chatbots and the voice bots, and all that code is available in that.
I gotcha. Okay.
I'm still working on building up the library of. It's hard for me to template.
You're showing off what Merlin can do with these things. It isn't really meant to be like a core function. It's more like, okay, you've got all this data. What can you do with it? Here's some examples.
Exactly. And now here again, right, with that logic, okay, they're down, make it red. I don't, my staff never needs to go to the CLI anymore. They hop in the repo. And even, if I had the Git history on this, we can use things like Git lens. I'm actually getting the full configuration as well as one of the learn functions. So, if we were to dive in, if you wanted what the actual, right here, we can say shut down, right? That is the, under the show run or the learned config, we can see that this interface is shut down, right? Without ever touching the CLI, and it only runs in a few seconds as well. So I'm just going to, let me just turn off the screen sharing here real quick.
So John, this was cool, man, showing the value of gathering that data, getting it structured, and then just showing off some fancy stuff of what you can do with it once Merlin has done its magic. So this was a lot of fun. So you've mentioned that this is open source. People can go to GitHub, I assume, and get this when you tell them where the repo is?
Yeah, for sure. It's on github.com, and then there's a /automate your network, which you can explore. And there's, my Ansible Fest deck is on there, and there's lots of Ansible and lots of different things, but there's Merlin is starred on there. It's my main repo. And if you've ever wanted to, what I think is neat is we actually saw quite a bit of code. So if someone wants to practice HTML and work on their tags, or work on style sheeting, work on Jinja, work on Python, add more APIs, add more show commands and parse commands. We've even I had a contributor from Russia plug in Junos. Because there's parsers, right? So
you just answered my next question. If you're accepting pull requests, and it sounds like you are.
I'm taking all pull requests, and we have F5, and I'd love to get Arista. I'd love to get more Junos. I'd love to get DNA Center and ACI, and anything with the REST API. So I'm going to be very busy with this, and I'm happy to help. I've had some great contributions, and some people really helped me write up the code. And like I said, if you just want to, I've always wanted to make a web page. Well, I need web pages. I need lots of them. So come and help me write some code.
Now, John, you said automate your network, which the GitHub repo. Where else can people find you? We mentioned partway through the demo, automateyournetwork.ca. That's your website, yeah, your blog and so on.
Correct.
And where else can people find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter, all the time. It's John_Capobianco. I'd be happy to connect on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and I have that WebEx channel and the Discord are actually open if you want to join our community of developers. Just DM me and I'll get you the channel invites to those. So I'm out there all the time, and I saw the Bell fiber guy in my yard, and as soon as I have fiber to my house, I hope to start doing actual live development on Twitch and YouTube and things of that nature. So look for that in the next 6 months or so as well.
Very cool. Thanks for joining us here on the Packet Pushers YouTube channel, John.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun. Thanks, Ethan. And I'll make sure that phone number doesn't make its way onto GitHub.
Appreciate that. Thank you.